or we're going to call
Is this version 4?
3 or 4. 4, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's 4.
You'd think we'd been drinking. This is non-alcoholic beer, folks, just to let you know. This is non-alcoholic beer. We're promoting a local brew. So we're here today and we have the opportunity to have a great conversation. And my name's Colin, and this is Nasim, and
I'm Cory.
And there's Cory.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to you in a minute or two, and you can do your own introduction, because this is new for me for meeting you as well. So I look forward to hearing a little bit more about you. And maybe Nasim will get you to start as the introduction rock star Allard chair.
Yeah, I don't know, but sure. Nasim Bashir, I'm the CEO of Williams Engineering. We have 3 companies, 2 engineering companies, technology company. The Allard chair this year. I think it's still the end of December this year at MacEwan University. And I also chair Prairie Sky, a gondola company here in Edmonton, and chair Innovate Edmonton as well. And for me, innovation and business are huge passions of mine. Been around a while, judging by the gray hair. Been around less, try to say more than this guy over here, but was a really interesting guy in terms of things he's done in his world. But it's last of the summer season, and we're going to figure out what happens after this.
Absolutely. And my name's Colin. Really quickly, I get to have the opportunity to be the EIR, the Entrepreneur in Residence at MacEwan, and just kind of starting that. My little cycle goes till summer next year, and a great opportunity to work with you so far, Nasim. And this has been a lot of fun. We've had 4 kind of interviews and some great conversations from people that have been around a while in the business world. And I'm kind of coming at it. The questions I ask, I try to keep bringing it back down to those early stage entrepreneurs, students, and those just kind of dabbling in entrepreneurship a little bit, and early stage companies trying to figure it out. And then so we kind of get to learn some of the things you've learned and some of the things you've seen, and then bring that back into relevance for those people starting up, and hopefully get them off on the right foot and help them to avoid what I call needless failure out of the gate, and start maturing and becoming real companies. So usually just a conversation, about an hour and a half. You have a little bit you can talk about right in the front end, right, along with the introduction, and then I'll just we'll bounce around with some questions from me and from the audience, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, you bet. So my name's Cory Wasnack, and I've only ever worked for one company. So Avison Young Commercial Real Estate is the one job interview that I had, and I was 21 and walked into an industry in a firm that I knew nothing about. And to me, I knew the managing partner of our firm, and I knew he enjoyed what he did. And that, when I was talking to him about his business, I didn't know anything about commercial real estate, but I knew that this person loved what he did. And I knew that he loved building something with a great, aligned group of people that really wanted to help change the community. And so commercial real estate is a fascinating industry for the sense that it's a journey on a transaction, building this really in-depth relationship with a business owner or an organization that is trying to make a difference for their staff or their community of which they serve. Or, we're community builders. We're involved in having large power center, retail properties, industrial properties, high-rise office buildings come to life and get occupied. And so it's a fascinating industry, but I knew nothing about it when I first got into it. And it's an Edmonton story. So Avison Young started in Edmonton in 1978 and has really taken on a really interesting growth story of moving from just an Alberta company through the 80s and most of the 90s to becoming a Canadian company with offices in Toronto and Vancouver in the early 2000s. And then the financial crisis hit, and we became fascinated by the potential of growing in the US in the financial crisis. 2008 became our invitation to jump into the US. And so we became an opportunity for those that were seeking change in commercial real estate in the US to join a Canadian company, privately owned, and help us grow in the US. And so we became very quickly a real player in markets that were going through a lot of transition. Of a lot of frustration in the financial sector and the development world, and a lot of change that was happening in the industry. And we came into this market as an option for really good people that wanted to move away from slow-moving public organizations to this nimble Canadian private company that wanted to invest in these new markets. And so our growth just took off really quickly. And so 12 years ago, we were a 250-person company that did about 50 million in revenue per year, and just Canadian only, to now we're 5,000 people, and we're $1 billion company. We did, we're achieving revenue over $1 billion and a value more than that, and still private. And most of our ownership is still with the same people that started this journey to grow beyond Canada in 2008. And it's been a really fascinating story of taking risks when there's a lot of headwinds, and expanding with diversified business lines is something I've really learned a lot from Nasim in terms of the diversification strategy has been one of the greatest opportunities for us to scale. So expanding into new markets, expanding into different service lines. And so that has been a recipe that has worked out extremely well for us.
That's actually really cool. I mean, for starters, one job, that's pretty amazing too. I think I'm ticking over 40 somewhere, and I think mostly unemployable now. So as an entrepreneur, I have 6 companies and, getting into that. So that's really neat. I mean, and I actually didn't even know that about Avison Young. That's really cool that it started here and it's grown. And so 5,000 people. What are you seeing on the market now? Like in your experience in kind of the direction that you're trying to go from here forward, what does it look like?
It's really, the opportunity for us is to really bring technology into this old-fashioned industry that commercial real estate brokerage is very old-fashioned, and that it hasn't really been disrupted too significantly. There's still, in our industry, a bridge builder, bringing 2 parties together and working on a transaction. And for us, we see there being massive potential in introducing technology as our new currency of how to really speak to our audience. And instead of our industry being so flawed with hoarding information, making it difficult for the general public to find information, we're going to turn inside out, and we're really going to make technology a pathway for us to scale further. So that is going to be something that's going to be really fascinating to watch for us. We have many adjacent service lines to brokerage that are now a massive opportunity for us to scale those. So not just from a brokerage transaction, but for us to see appraisal, property management, project management, property tax advisory, mortgage brokerage to help our clients negotiate for better financing for their properties. Those adjacent service lines that all touch our clients in ways that we weren't servicing them before is now the growth opportunity for us to really broaden our ability to become an even more diverse, significant player that helps our clients between the transactions, and for us to continue just diversifying our talent as well is a big part of it. So as we look for young talent who are coming out of college, the university grads that are applying for positions for us now, we look at them through a very different perspective. We have a place for most skill sets. As we diversify the service lines, we need to be able to speak and perform differently to our clients that allow us to really think about the skills and the personalities very differently of how we build this company. So less one-dimensional, and much more diversified in the skill sets that can perform differently and speak differently to our clients. We really want our staff to look and feel more like the communities that we serve.
It's struck by what you were saying, Cory, about the transition at the financial crisis, and in your business, I don't know where the previous sort of iteration of companies were, but if we were just to say that if you went back to the 1900s, it was how about 100 years, the business was kind of run the same until you got to 2008, and there's this massive disruption that occurred in the marketplace, and you're disrupting that marketplace in terms of the business model that you had. And so that was 2008 to now, which is 13 years, and the next level of massive disruption is coming again. And so that cycle went from, call it 100 years to 13 years before there's a whole new reinvention that's going on in your business and in the business world in itself, right? And so the timeline went from what we thought was a really long period of time, eon almost, to 13 years. Let's do it all again. And so my question really for you in terms of this innovation cycle is, that technology piece I think is really important. That people piece is really important. Where's the next cycle? Or is it less than 13 years? Is it in about that range? Because we expect technology to drive things exponentially, and you're talking about that curve, right? In terms of how businesses will massively change, but kind of beyond that, with the tech piece and the innovation and with people, kind of what does that next sort of phase look like? And I'm going to ask you the real hard question is, what's the length of that phase before we're actually doing it again? That's
I remember you telling me.
Tough one, but
No, I remember you and I.
Start on top.
Yeah. Well, I remember you telling me about how technology was going to change the way your organization could serve your clients and win more business. A few years ago, you began to really become this technology intellect, and you studied how it could change the way you win business and serve your clients. And I feel like that to me was really inspirational a few years ago. And it takes a lot of time and trust in technology experts to help you disrupt your own organization. And so I think the cycle right now is long, and it's going to continue to get shorter as we have a tech native generation entering the workforce. For them, these devices they've never been without these devices,
yes,
right? And we still at the same time have a generation that are more traditional in the way they earn their business, the way they find their clients, and how they communicate with their clients.
Yeah.
And it's less with their thumbs, and it's still in the more old-fashioned style that works extremely well today. And that you have to be able to balance traditional relationship building and executing on business opportunities with a technology native, independent talent that's entering the workforce and our clients that now want to be spoken in that way as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's the cycle of introducing technology to disrupt our organization. This is the most challenging part of it, because we have to have both traditional and new age styles in the workforce coexist and not push opposite sides of a magnet against each other. But they need to realize that one helps enable another, and that technology is certainly the currency of the future. And as we continue to spend more of our time investing in that and hiring resources that are very comfortable with that, we also need to be sure that we are supporting and enabling the traditional part of our business to perform at a really high level. They still need the tools and the support from the organization, but the cycle is going to be short, because as we have a widening group of our team and our clients, more importantly, who are demanding that their properties and their style of doing due diligence and transacting through technology, that's only going to widen and unfold with higher velocity. And so those cycles shorten. And so I think technology enables you to pivot faster through disruptions beyond your control, whether it's health crisis or financial crisis. And so I think, we're learning a lot about where people want to work and how to build communities in this new post-COVID, still COVID environment. And, all of that, technology is a common thread that weaves through all of this, and helping your team still work well, helping, still serve your clients in a way that not too dysfunctional through this type of disruption brought on by health crisis.
It's your business in some ways is very much like mine. Some of my businesses, I guess, in that the people side of the business, the relationship side of the business is just as important today as it was 13 years ago or even 2 years ago, right? And in the meantime, you're mixing this sort of digital sort of component of things, which enhances your business or enhances the value you create for your customers in that process. But you still got to get out and meet people. And as I think you're saying there too, is you still need to bring others in the organization along that maybe a generation behind or two, and see if they can actually have that mindset change to adapt to the newer things that are coming in. And I think most people, my experience has been that most people actually that are older generations do come along for the ride, but some don't actually make it. And from my point more than anything is that mindset is really important in terms of how do you get your people to come along for the ride and believe that you tell them, not quite that we're going to be floating around in rocket ships or anything tomorrow, really close, but how do you get some of those relationship people that are key to your business over that mindset line to believe that things are changing around them faster than they ever have, and it's not status quo. Like you and your board and your team, how do you kind of manage that? How do you bring people along with you? It's a tough one. I know.
You're right. It is challenging. That stems from an insecurity complex. So nobody likes the fact that the method of which we work is changing, and you either have to get on board. And technology is it's a requirement to be able to help build a business to serve our clients. And so if the client dependency is the mandate, the professionals in our organization, in our industry, have to evolve because that's what the clients require. So we're not creating the demand; we're responding to the behavior that's demanding us to meet them where they're going.
Yeah, right. Like in my mind, you've got. Well, I don't know if there's circles or camps or whatever you want to look at. You've got a bunch of people. And you mentioned you've got tech natives versus tech, I forget what you call it, immigrants, right? And then even older that haven't really done that. And to your point, relationships is really the core. So you've got the people and the operators, the people that are doing things, creating transactions, relationships, all that. You've got processes. This is how we do certain things. This is how we build a relationship. This is how we carry out our business day-to-day in operations. And then you've got the technology that is somewhat an enabler. How do you see the priorities on that and actually create, well, I guess for lack of a better terminology, something from nothing, right? As some of those have to go first. And how do you balance those three things in harmony so that you bring people along as they need because they've got to figure it out. You maintain the flow and direction of the business model, and you find new technologies that are emerging constantly to enable all of this.
I think a large part of helping people come on board is the fact that you need to find a win for them. So I think of it as the WIFM model, the what's in it for me. And if you can find a way to bring the hesitant folks into understanding that digital capabilities can help us perform faster, with more accuracy, with be more congruent with our clients, and relationships help you get invited to the competition, but it's your innovation that helps you win the opportunity. So relationships will often be why you get invited to the RFP process. But ultimately, relationships can become a wash. In a smaller industry, you can have companies that all feel like their relationships are warranting them the opportunity to compete for the business. But you need the differentiator. And for now, we're still in a moment where the most innovative companies have something different in the toolbox. And so that technology is an and, still not an or. So we have to be able to say that we have trusting relationships that have brought us to this opportunity, but it's a special tool in the toolbox right now that helps differentiate yourself until a few years from now, you're not that different anymore, right? So this is where the cycle changes. And so I think, innovation, and technology adaptation in our industry is happening so quickly. And I think where people have been able to see technology change themselves professionally is how they are adapting to it personally. So you can buy a car, without ever sitting in it. You can get a mortgage without ever going to a bank. You can book a trip without ever speaking to anybody. You're buying a home, and the amount of online consumption that we're experiencing in all parts of our lives. That now is just a lifestyle comfort choice that it's such an easy leap from lifestyle comfort with the digitization of how we're living our lives to welcoming it professionally. And so the blend is happening. And I think that the disruption is so apparent in our industry. Commercial real estate has been a real laggard in adapting to technology disruption, and it's happening very quickly now. So I think that's not going to feel so uncomfortable for a lot of people really soon.
Just thinking about it. I mean, our topic today is really innovation and structures, right? And I've always been really, really impressed in terms of what Cory and his company have done. This is, in terms of technology companies, we talk about, which is really not my space. I'm learning in that space for the last 5 years or so. But this is a unicorn from Edmonton. Right. This is a 5,000 person company that's globally distributed. It's based here, $1 billion in revenues.
Yeah,
not about
even
valuation. Whatever that
exactly.
And that started here and has moved out of here, and we hardly ever talk about that. As I hear a lot about we want these technology companies. We want to hear an Amazon. We want to hear startups. We want to see them grow to be billion-dollar companies. Yeah, and we've got a lot actually in Edmonton that is started here, right? And turned into.
I think that's fantastic.
So sort of back to the structures side of things. I still think that's fascinating in terms of how you actually achieved that kind of growth, right? And that you did, where you start off kind of like where our companies are today, which is it's employee held, and it gets to be about that size as you were way back in the day, and then the switch came on, and it was just a climb this way. So what was it in terms of structures and like all the gory details that you can tell us basically? But so for those that are the audience here is those young folks that are looking for that inflection point along the way. What is it in that growth that came along that made that huge difference to your ability to be able to get on the ride and get to the top? Right?
Yeah, I love that question, because I think that the door that opened for us it's not a door that we knew was there until there was this force in the industry that changed things. So we took advantage of the opportunity from the financial crisis was upon us, and we saw there being a frustration in our industry that allowed us to recruit top talent. And that there's nothing like scaling quickly when you can get your hands on a recruiting opportunity to hire top talent in a market where we didn't exist. Mm-hmm. So it's very magnetizing of the power of top talent that is a pioneer for us to be able to plant a flag in a new city, establish Avison Young in Chicago or New York or Washington, D.C. It's an incredible story of growth for us in Washington, D.C. by being able to work with some highly respected people in that marketplace and have them believe in the story of what Avison Young is trying to accomplish and have them be a part of that and become an owner in the business. And they became a magnet for us to recruit faster and others that we really respected their choice to join Avison Young. And there was that safety in that decision that others, like clients and other talent that saw that this team is a best-in-class team, highly respected in, say, the Washington, D.C. community. And that was the enabler for us to hire other great talent and work with those clients to allow them to switch their business to Avison Young because they believed in the choice of those that they respected. So that two-pronged situation, one is recognizing that there's disruption happening in our industry brought on by the financial crisis. And two, going out and getting the best talent in unknown markets to us, markets where we had no relevance. We were completely unknown to individuals and businesses in these markets, but we found incredible people to plant our flag with them and giving them the leadership of those regions and build around them. And that was the enabler for us to hire great people.
Can I go back on that moment in time? Okay, you had mentioned that pre-financial crisis, there was some interest in expanding or possibly looking at the States, but it wasn't really there. But I am hearing that once it did open up, the opportunity presented itself and you kind of took off. But even when you're talking about this, you're walking into, say, a Washington, D.C. or a Chicago. In my mind, what sold it was the vision. This is who we are, and this is what we're trying to accomplish. And that attracted the like-minded in that area to kind of say, yeah, let's take up this flag and run with it. Okay, so there's obviously a clear vision, which I love. But the other thing, what did that decision start to look like? What were the triggers that really initiated that, oh my goodness, we have an opportunity here, let's go? Like, what led up to that and then triggered it when you started to really see it, like in the team and the leadership and the discussions and the board? How were you guys all kind of collectively starting to notice this, and how did it gel to finally say, this is how we're going to run forward?
I'd say there's two things that we didn't recognize when we first started to pull that thread to see, is there something to this? Is there something more that we can really achieve with this growth story? And we began having conversations with folks, and they're like, tell us a story about this Canadian company again. Like a private Canadian company owned by the leaders of the company, those who are still in the trenches of this business. And there were two things there that we picked up on as we're having these conversations. People outside of Canada really respect Canadian companies. And some of the best people we hired came from public companies. And they missed what it was like to work for a smaller, nimble, private company whose leadership and ownership are in the trenches doing the business that they're doing, for good or bad, living with the consequences of the decisions of the company. And most of our peers are owned by the public markets, people who don't work for the company, who are not in the industry. And the strength of the financials of those public companies are the driving forces of decisions that are made for those companies. And they perform very well for the shareholders. In our case, we knew that we had something special with our ability to build this large enterprise, being a private employee-owned company. And the Canadian factor was completely missed on us, right? Because we were just unaware of the perception of a profitable private employee-run company based in Canada going into the US, and people were excited to tell that story as to why they made a career change, why this client is going to move their business from one of our peers to Avison Young. And they were telling the story of working with this private Canadian company who's investing in their city. And we underestimated that.
That's really interesting. I mean, I love that. It's very encouraging, and I can see it. So at the moment you started noticing that, I mean, I'd be really interested to be a bit of a fly on the wall in some of those discussions. It sounds like you didn't even notice that part, the Canadian privately held thing, until you were kind of going in and starting to get recognition in the US, right? So there was probably some growth starting to happen. But leading up to that even, you're saying, okay, we're going to go into the US and we think this is the offering. But how did that kind of go? Maybe tell me how some of those initial conversations started right? You're reaching out and knocking on some doors and saying, hey, you know, this is what we're looking to do. How did that kind of come about?
We had to find a great US leader.
Okay.
And
So
so
like a champion, initial champion.
precisely. Yeah. Yeah. So we found someone, and his name's Mark Rose, and who's our CEO and is based in Chicago, who had been the CEO of another major company, a US-based company, and he helped articulate what was in our heads. He helped bring to life the vision that we didn't know was possible, and he made us think way bigger. And he was really the muscle behind the execution. So having someone who was respected in the US be our recruiting champion, that was speaking their language on behalf of this Canadian story. So he was this great bridge for us to now have respect in the conversations with people that were in the US and big clients, because he was a proven powerhouse leader in the industry. And that gave us legitimacy to be able to be in the room in those conversations.
I think it even goes to, you said it there, it's almost like they're the translator, right? You're taking this Canadian vision and then having an American describe it in their terms and frame of reference for people to get it. Right. Yeah. And it caught fire.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Now, I don't know what that looks like, but I'm sitting there doing some math in my head and looking at the growth trajectory that you've had since, say, 2008 till now. Holy crap, right? Like that's a pretty steep growth curve, and we're talking about that inflection. Going back to the structure question, how do you start structuring that and putting the foundational pieces in to be able to support this infrastructure for that next vision?
Mm-hmm. It actually ties nicely into technology, because we needed to move from an organization that was built on local pillars of strength, and instead create an organization that had resources and bench strength that serves the entire organization, as opposed to just a 1 + 1 + 1, result. So we had the foundation of an organization that was great in its parts, but to create the opportunity to have way more efficiency, we needed centers of excellence. And so to have great finance and marketing and legal resources serve an organization, not serve an office, not serve a region, we need to be able to have the opportunity to use technology to have someone who is just a crackerjack, smart individual that sits in San Jose, California, be able to bring their intellect into a conversation that's helping serve tech clients in Toronto. Someone who sits in Austin who can now bring in their expertise to a Calgary pursuit. So government, city like Edmonton, to be able to use some of the government expertise that we have that's in DC. Now we start thinking about talent and skills are transferable and relatable to other regions. And so we had to really shift ourselves from thinking hiring strong resources that serve the market in which they're situated to broadening our reach and realizing that we can have way more success and do a better job servicing our clients by the mobility of their talent and their skill set. So I think what's interesting about MacEwan and all the young adults, all the students that are coming through the program, to see the opportunity that's more available to them than ever for the reach of how they can contribute to a business and make themselves available for employment and skill sharing, and the fact that we're without borders even more so than we were before. We're not limited by geographical boundaries. Coming on the other side of what we've just experienced the last year and a half, talent can go anywhere, and you can perform in any time zone. So we're all free agents more than we've ever been.
I agree. You end up, in my mind, it kind of the visual I get is it erases the lines that we arbitrarily drew 400, 500, 600 years ago.
Yeah, those maps.
Those map lines, which mean nothing. Like, they were just an outcome from conquest more than anything else.
Right.
Right?
I own this.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of things that we're seeing today and have been the last few years really gets rid of those lines. Even time zones to a certain extent are getting erased, but along the way. I'm also interested. So it's not just, so Cory's company is not just North American. It's global. And so interested in sort of what your experience was like in. I think you first went to Germany, right? I think in terms of your European continent, right? So the European, and we went to actually Berlin together to go look at some real estate a couple of years ago. For some other things that we work on, but just 3 years ago, just before COVID. But it was interesting for me to go and see how the brand is the same in Berlin,
right?
In terms of the people that you met and worked with and talked to, and this is sort of the one question is, I guess, is what was that like to make that leap? Canada, US kind of seems to be okay. We know Canada, you go to the US, right? That's step 2 of a dance move. You just go that direction. But to go reach across the Atlantic, and then I don't think go to the Pacific. I don't know if you're in Asia yet or not. But maybe I'll let you talk about it. But and to go and do that again, it truly comes this sort of wrap around organization around the globe, that is, and how you do that. But maybe spend a little bit of time in terms of that structure and that global structure, and that move to even more complicated places where you have to polish your German to get into business, or you need to polish your whatever language in Asia to polish your business. Let's talk a bit about that in terms of the structure.
What's interesting about that is that we often think about different jurisdictions as a way to win more business, but we have thought of it as a way to help train our staff through more knowledge sharing and more client case study experience, even introducing new technology programs. The intellect that we have, say, in the UK, we've got an unbelievable group in the UK who were really strong in areas that we were still early stage, still building. They were incredibly strong in areas like property management and project management, and the consulting business is huge for us over in the UK. And the opportunity for them to help educate us as we're in the developing stage, not only could they help us win more business, and that's an external way of thinking, but we really needed to tap into the internal opportunity to grow our capabilities. And having them speak to our teams and educate ourselves through these internal expertise we have. We always think about serving our clients, sharing the expertise with those outside of the firm. What an opportunity for us to speak to our German leaders and our UK personnel to say, help us be better. Train us on these programs, help educate us on how you've delivered your service to your clients. And so that's been really fascinating to me. You want some consistency, and when people work with Avison Young, there's an expectation for certain experience, and that comes from a cultural consistency. But being more trusting of internal education experiences, and it's been we have this large company with a family intent of how we are working on all kinds of really fascinating social issues that are important to society today. And the issues that are important to us in Canada and the US are similarly valued to those in our UK office and in our German office and in other countries that we're in. And so when we see our Day of Giving, for example, next month, and we close down the entire organization, everybody picks a charity that's important to the local offices, and we all go and contribute to it. And the stories that come from that on the other side of it, where you feel you can have 5,000 people in a company that still feels in a way you're connected is in a give a care, supportive community organization. And so, those values that you can expect in these other regions need to be paramount of what you want to be known for, how you deliver to the community and treat each other. And so I think that consistency of not just chasing revenue when you're growing, when you're expanding in other jurisdictions, but there has to be a values alignment, cultural alignment before the desire to just add revenue. And so you can make mistakes in recruiting because you get so focused on what it could mean for additional revenue and realize that they're actually brand destructive personality.
Yes.
And so, having value alignment and, having that supportive culture can unlock the right revenue while building an organization of people that have high care.
Yes. I'm such a big fan of that. I mean, I run an accelerator in the SDGs, right? So the Sustainable Development Goals and ESG focus, right? And so I love hearing when companies, and I think when you center a culture around that kind of thing, it makes it stronger and more family-like, and certainly actually has the outcome of better revenue, which is the ironic thing. But there's this balance. Like I could imagine, like I'm thinking of you walking into the UK, and there's this team or group of people that you're looking at and going, oh my goodness, those guys are rock stars. We want them. Did it just happen that you had the alignment, or was it something that you came in and led with the alignment? Or, you know what I mean? When you're approaching this other business to, collaborate with and make a new Avison Young in the UK, where do those conversations start and how do they unfold into we give a care, right?
Yeah, you can always buy revenue.
Right.
But you end up having a Frankenstein result.
Yes.
And so for us, revenue has to be the secondary priority. It has to be about being, you're building an organization that's sustainable, that has this longevity of people that really enjoy spending more awake time working with each other than they do with anyone else in their lives. And I think that the revenue cannot be the priority to transact and grow. It has to be the outcome.
Yeah.
And hiring with an intent to make the organization better with the individuals and how they work and why they work, and the skill set, that having that trust that revenue flows from that, not the reverse. And, for us, we really need to get this priority straight.
So I got a question from the other Colin here, which is, I guess somebody that's watching us today, but why do you think not that many local companies go global? I guess is why do companies in Edmonton or local companies here not go global? Like what gets in the way? Having, seeing it from the other side now, what gets in the way, you think, in terms of preventing that global?
I wonder if it has a lot to do with trust of a team where you're not present. And so, you really have to be comfortable with people being situated in other cities and other provinces, other countries, and know that they can get the job done and represent the organization in the finest way that you think you can. And because you simply can't be everywhere. As a leader that sets the tone, you really have limited exposure to impact those other jurisdictions. You can only dabble. And so ultimately you have to have a leadership in those other geographies to be able to trust that leadership to get the job done and be aligned on the outcome and the path of how you're going to get there. But it is really hard work to think you can do it on your own. And you have to have that ability to hire exceptional talent. You can place full trust and empower them to grow to their best abilities in a way that you're aligned on the outcome. But because you simply can't be everywhere, an entrepreneur can only, be in so many places at one time. And so I think that while scaling up and growing in other jurisdictions, sounds like a fine roadmap, But it's only done with success if you have great leaders who have that runway to perform and have that trust and that alignment of the ownership team.
It really is a structural solution, really, if you will, in terms of how you build your company, and then how well you can actually translate the values and the purpose of the company down to others, and how they adopt that in a distributed way, and then it can actually keep delivering that message it's never quite the same, but in a sort of a uniform way, so that everybody's on the same page. But if you get to if the leadership team can't transmit that information to that perspective to the other teams that are remote from you, that's a pretty wide chasm between the two. Right. And if you can't bridge that chasm, then it isn't going to grow. It isn't going to do anything because people are lost. You're right. You can't at a certain size of company you can. We're substantially smaller for sure, and we have maybe 10. Well, I'd say we have 170 locations today because of COVID, but the bridge is it's a long way away, right?
Yeah.
And so for me to go and communicate with everybody effectively, it takes me an hour and a half, 2 hours to talk about my purpose. And so you do that times 100 people, 180 people, like doing it with 5,000 people, like it would be an impossibility for your leadership team to get it out there, unless you had disciples, right? Unless you had almost a biblical version of how you could make it go, right?
But talk about how for you, there's two types of growth. There's locational growth and there's service line growth. And you have various service lines that you are trained. You're an expert in one area, but you have numerous areas. There's a story around your growth, both in service lines and now technology and your locations. But, as a leader of your organization, you have these other service lines, new ways to serve your clients, but that wasn't your expertise necessarily. Mm-hmm. And so you gotta get really comfortable knowing that, yes, there is something to this. There is some magic in this way for us to grow. But you have to trust the people that are going to be making those decisions to invest in those areas, because that's not necessarily your expertise.
For sure. And, there's kind of the day-to-day side of in the engineering business, the doing the engineering thing, which I don't do anymore, but that you just rely on experts to do that. But you actually have to have this sort of common sets of understanding, strategy, purpose, strategy, culture, those kinds of things would just kind of get morphed across the organization. It kind of sits on either on the top or on the bottom, depending on how you want to actually visualize it, right? The bottom is probably better, but and just that never-ending, incessant sort of push on here's how we make decisions. Whether it's it's in a situation last week where we had to fire a major customer, and it was based on values that we went through that process, and so the team was saying, we can't work with these folks. They're not us. Right. And so what would that look like now the customer's phoning the CEO of me saying, we can't work with you guys. You're a bunch of towheads. And it wasn't really the case. The problem was really with the customer. We had this completely disparate sort of view of what values look like. And so you make the call and you say, it's the customer, you guys. The customer's always right. Or do you protect your team and not listen to your team and make choices based on the values that you have as a company and fire the customer? And we chose to fire the customer because it's way more expensive to find 3 or 4 or 5, 10 more people after I disappoint them by keeping the customer, right? And so
that's one of the best stories ever.
That connection is, you keep on hearing this. The customer is always right sort of approach to things.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's other customers who want, because it's just way too much wear and tear on the team to actually have to do what they don't want to do, especially when they're mobile, when they can get up and go across the road and do their own stuff. Because it's really talent. Back to your comment about talent. It is. So yeah, to answer the question, it really is, how do you actually communicate and stitch these ideas, these values, this purpose direction. And then eventually what happens, I think, is the culture of the organization gets built for the people who believe in all those things.
Right.
And then it is what it is.
You mentioned this, you mentioned it before, because when you're talking about going to the US and the excitement that was kind of driven from the people to go, oh my goodness, I can have a say, right? And the way I kind of see it is there's these three parties that we're always trying to keep happy: shareholders, customers, and employees. And it seems that a lot of the bigger public companies drive forward on the basis of trying to make sure that the shareholders are happy first, to the detriment sometimes of the other two, right? And that's obviously a very blanket statement and not always accurate, but what I'm finding, or especially when I listen to your growth trajectory and stories like what Nasim just shared as well, is really ultimately, if you look after your family, your core employees, and you do right by them, they make great customers, and great customers make shareholders very happy, right? And so getting that priority straight, I think, is really kind of the key. And even for you, when you were talking about extending, extending the latitude or the trust or the confidence that this other person who drives this line of business or this location or whatever it is, you have to be able to know that they're going to make the decisions the right way. They're going to be having a core set of values that is true. To me, this is stating, even from the small company, how important it is to get some of those core things lined up first before you make revenue, before you're trying to constantly just drive forward on the almighty dollar. Right.
So you're right. And I think you're bang on right about that. The late 1970s and early 80s, pecking order was exactly what you described: shareholders, customers, staff.
Yeah.
The better way to run an organization today is the reverse, right? Care of your employees first. Take amazing care of your employees. They'll take great care of your customers, and that's going to produce great results that the shareholders will be very pleased. So that's exactly what modern day management has to excel at. I think that's the greatest stories of companies that perform at an elite level, built for the future, is those that take care of their people first. And I think that's this experience. Like, I'm so fascinated by how students today feel entering the workforce, why they're going to choose the organization they want to work for. There's very different priorities now that they're seeking. They want to talk about ESG, environmental and social governance, and that is, and I've been in job interviews recently with people that are asking about a career in commercial real estate, and they're saying, "Tell me about Avison Young's ESG policy. What are your goals with ESG? Tell me about your diversity and inclusion mandate." And if as an organization you don't have clear objectives and measurable results in these categories, you're not going to get the best out of it.
Which is really interesting. Okay, so I have these 4 C's that I always talk about with hiring, right? I was a recruiter for a number of years, and I worked with a lot of the big companies across Canada. And so I really learned a lot of this on building and creating teams. But to me, there's kind of 4 major groups. There's competency, chemistry, character, and capacity. That's the way I kind of say it, the 4 C's thing. And most entrepreneurs, especially the early stage entrepreneurs, they really drive for capacity or for competency. Can you do the job I need from you? And it's kind of almost, in my mind, it's a little bit like salary. At a certain point, the salary inflection goes like this, right? As long as I make enough to pay my bills, I don't need to drive for that extra 100,000 that I need in my bank account, right? What I want to get is make sure my bills are paid, and then everything else becomes about, the important things. I can't work for you as much as you might be a ESG focused, D&I focused company if you're not going to pay me, right? So there's got to be that kind of a latitude. But when you're having a discussion, where I'm going with this is those 4 C's. you can always find the competency. So you can go around and look for good people that can do the job. But what the strength is, and what the power is, and what the longevity of it all is, really comes down to that family and that the culture and the drive for shared values around D&I or ESG or whatever you're trying to accomplish, right?
If I give you an Edmonton story, so to bring it home, for Avison Young, I manage the Edmonton office, and one of the greatest thrills that I came to appreciate before COVID, our company, we've been growing a lot in Edmonton and adding these new service lines, and we've doubled the number of staff that we have in Edmonton. And so we're sitting at about 80 people today. And a couple of years ago, we were around 50. And so we've grown a lot. When you grow, you are hiring people with different skill sets and personalities when you're expanding service lines. And that may not always mesh with the legacy part of the business who had certain types of personalities.
Yeah.
And you're adding different service lines with different traits.
Every hire is a new culture.
Right. Before COVID, we went 2.5 years without a single person leaving Avison Young. So 2.5 years without a single person letting us know they were going to change companies. And we found that to be fascinating because what we focused on in the 4 C's description that you said is that we put competency near the bottom because we didn't know if they would have the competency until they actually had the job.
Right.
But we
So-
needed to sniff out their character.
Of course.
And if we felt that their character and what we thought would be their values, if there was going to be this positive impact of having these individuals join us, then we knew that this would be an organization still built on those core fundamentals. The competency, you had to take a risk on because you really don't know what the work dividends will be until they're in the job.
Yes.
But you can start to assess personality and character and value perspectives in those early stage discussions. And so for us to go 2.5 years without a single person leaving, we really felt so fortunate. There is some magic in this group of people that we have here in Edmonton that allowed us to be really proud. We were having record results financially, and that was a great outcome. But that wasn't what we were chasing.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That was the reward.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so much there. So now that you've gone from that 50 to 80, what have you noticed as far as some of the bend in, say, the culture? You know, because like you said, every hire has a new culture to the team. Did some of those people leave? Was there conflicts that started, or was it just more horsepower behind the original vision, values, mission, goals? Or
Well, I think if we think about current day events, we're learning a lot around how, as an organization, we have to be way more trusting and way more flexible to meet the needs of our staff. And that may mean work product is not going to only be delivered between certain hours and certain days.
Right.
Great work product can come at 11 at night on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And you know, for us to know that we may not see everybody in the office every day, that we may not hear from people during typical work hours, but if the work product is still as high as you can expect, you've got to give that latitude for people to deliver in a way that works for them, right? We as a company, we have to meet the needs of our employees, not be forceful for employees to meet the needs of the company. So there has to be some happy marriage there, and that comes with the employer trusting the employees a lot more.
Yeah.
And in order for us to be able to keep really great talent, we have to be way more accommodating, way more trusting of the choices that our employees are making and how they're going to get the work done. Now, I'm always fascinated by the idea of companies eliminating structured vacation. You know, Netflix, you know, latest, you know, story around, you know, no vacation policies. And you know, that's one example of employee trust, allowing them to make the best decisions. And I think that this experience the last year and a half has taught employers is that, you can use technology to still, enable your employees to deliver great work and stay connected. There's still this fundamental purpose, I think, for people to be together. But, we now are getting way more freedom of decision-making in the hands of our employees to find a way to do their best work, as long as the best work is still finding its way to the client.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm trying to wrestle or help other people try to figure some of this stuff out, because it's not about the revenue. I mean, and it's not even about productivity, right? Like if you look at the last 200 years of the Industrial Revolution, I mean, a lot of it is moving from making stuff happen and growing fields and producing shoes or whatever it might be, to rubber stamping at 150,000 times a day, right? Like the production lines. But we're moving, I mean, that still has to be done. But what I'm hearing you say is like, listen, what needs to be done. You're in a sales organization, really driven by sales. And a lot of the sales world is like, this has to be done, and here's your targets and all that kind of stuff. Before it was, checking over the shoulder, making sure you're doing the things you're supposed to be doing. And now that's blowing the doors off of it, especially with COVID and everything that's happened. So it really comes down to, like you said, that trust. So is it a shift from productivity to outcomes? Is it a shift from productivity to trust? Is it where are those things coming up? And could you define them, the real markers of some of these things that are making a difference in those outcomes?
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I sort of step back a bit, which is, not only are we erasing, the construct that we grew up with, or our parents grew up with around, the lines of the continent and the lines of the countries, but we're eradicating the lines around time, because it doesn't really matter when people work, and we're doing that because, and it depends again on the generation that you've got in your workforce. We're doing that because people actually care about their lives.
Yes.
So, when my dad would work 80 hours a week, and he'd have to he was a real estate guy. He's selling new homes, and he'd be in the in the show home until 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night before he come home for dinner, right? Because that's what the business demanded. But he wouldn't leave the house until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Because his work time was, in terms of, and he'd be talking to customers during the day. But at Williams, we kind of call it time shifting, which is, it doesn't really matter when you work as long as the work gets done. And it's because our people have to drop the kids off at school, and they got to go to the doctor. They got to get the dog to the vet, and they got to take granddad to get his ears checked, and they got to do all these things that we all need to do and want to do. And this construct of bums in seats from 8 to 5 it never worked. How do you
Right.
actually engage with people to literally be in your chair just because your boss likes to see it and has got some old ways of really, really old ways of seeing productivity is arms moving and heads nodding and bums in seats. It's a ridiculous construct. When you are actually really moving to impact and output. And so how do you measure output and impact? Ends up being a very unique conversation for each kind of company or each kind of role. But especially in the sales role, I was talking to one of our engineers / sales guys the other day, is when you want to meet a client, so a client flies in from wherever and they want to go and have dinner and a couple bottles of wine, and you don't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning. Because you're a sales organization, or you're sales focused. Are you going to crawl your way out of bed in the morning, go to the gym at 6, and head into the office afterwards because your boss says you should? It's dumb. It's absolutely dumb. So if your day needs to be this day,
So you're saying it's great to go out and drink all night and sleep in and start later,
or it should shift things. Yeah, that could be it. Right? Because as long as the family unit, I think, is getting something out of that. But the next day it could be, I need to be up at 6 to go for a run, take the kids to school, and then, or I need to pick one up at 3:30, or I need to be at home because they lost their key or something, or they let the dog out. Time doesn't matter, and place in time doesn't matter. What really matters at the end of the day is that you do what you love.
Yeah.
In our firm, it's always family first, period. And so if you take care of those things and you take care of your people again, there's no reason why they're going to not want to work whenever it makes a lot of sense. If you're a real rare person that's not going to, it's not really going to put the energy into it, and eventually they'll select out in some way or another. Anyways, right? So it's okay. That's my version of the world is time does not matter, space does not matter, location does not matter, lines do not matter. What really matters is that you all understand the mission you're on, and then what your contribution to that mission is.
I have a possibly a bigger question than we could possibly answer today, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Okay, so I was a part of an organization. We went from 3 to about 13 people in the space of a few years or whatever. But we were running, 10 people were running 13 million in revenue, right? So we were doing really good. We played darts half the day because we're talking, and we'd have a headset on and we're throwing darts and having fun and talking. But there's this balance. Okay, so we're talking. A lot of what you're saying and what I'm hearing is there has to be a trust, and that trust comes from this intrinsic motivation, right? I'm not watching over your shoulder, making sure that you're there in the office at bum and seat at 8 a.m., right? There's a trust that you are going to do what you want to do because you know it needs to get done, right? And we're trying to come up with outcomes. But then there's also this thing of, I don't know what you want to call it, motivation again, especially in a sales organization, right? Our targets are X. And when I'm going to set my new targets for the new year and I'm looking back at the old year, it's really easy to either A, get comfortable, right? Because, hey, I did all right last year. So how do you keep a stretch in there? If you know what I mean, right? I think any human being is better off if there's a little bit of a stretch all the time. Right. And so, yes, I trust you to get done what you need to get done. And I trust that you're going to look after and manage your family. But at some point, there's all of those things conflicting. We want to retire at some day. We want to take some more vacation time, but we still want to improve our targets and stretch goal to another level. How does that get managed? Well, is that bigger than we could even possibly do today?
Probably, but I think that if you break it down maybe into two kinds of people, right? Those that most people are generally self-motivated in some way or another, and they just like to do better than they did last time. Whether it's your 10K is under an hour, or now it's under 50 minutes, or it's under 40 minutes, or I have no idea what mine would be today, but it's not an hour, that's for sure. But everybody's, I think in general, that gets fired up by
part too.
Yeah, I think humans in general like to just consistently do better than they were doing before.
I really like
kids to be better, smarter, or I want my kids to be, getting a master's degree or a PhD or whatever. Like each generation is just always trying to get better and better in terms of what it is that they do. I think we naturally go that way. The challenge becomes when you've got, I think, other people in your organization who kind of appear to be coasting to the ones that are pushing themselves, right? And so that creates an interesting dynamic, I think, in companies where, why am I doing what I do and you're doing what you do? I think that leaves, I think that's why certain programs you might run, whether it be compensation or profit sharing, short-term, long-term incentives, options, those kinds of things play, I think, an important role in rewarding those for that extra, what appears to be extra output or hitting those points. It ends up being a bit of a reward, I think.
Okay, so then you're definitely talking about some form of a pull still.
Yeah, and some are just going to be happy just doing their thing, and maybe that's okay at the firm they're in, or maybe they should go work for somebody else, right? Because we're motivated.
We're a driven team,
right? Yeah, and so maybe that happens between your teammates, or maybe it happens in terms of the way you manage, or whatever that dynamic is, to spin them out or to spool them up, right? Because you should do it both ways. But
what do you think?
Well, I find it fascinating to think about the DNA of top performers.
Yep.
When top performers are hitting their stride and achieving higher levels of greatness, it's a dopamine hit for them.
Sure.
Top performers hate feeling flat.
Yeah.
Top performers get frustrated when they have a setback. So when you think about the DNA of high performers, they are driven to continue pushing the ball forward. And as an organization, if you can not be slowed by the lowest common denominator, but instead be pulled by the highest performers. And Nasim's right on. There has to be a compensation model that rewards for great success, right? Because the owner should never be the only one that feels the dividends of a great result. Sharing and recognizing success where it's warranted, is absolutely a requirement. But I'm always struck by watching top performers in the moments where they're having a down period, and the frustration and determination that comes from them wanting to get out of that funk, and having more people that feel that way, just naturally they want to repeat and grow their abilities to do better.
I got to say, with that kind of an answer, and just even how that's kind of gone, I'm very encouraged with the optimism of the future. Because I think it's easy to look at. I remember back around the turn of the century, talking to companies and a lot of hiring managers being frustrated at the millennials. Let's just label them as the millennials. Well, these guys, they're so entitled, they just want everything kind of handed to them. And I'm like, wait a second. I mean, I think if you were offered the same job as you're trying to offer those people, they probably wouldn't take it, or you wouldn't take it. And they're kind of like, yeah, I guess you're probably right. And it's a shift. My dad getting booted out in the 80s from companies like Kellogg's, right? Like big companies, big corporations, just booted for the sake of downsizing or whatever. To now, there's a lot more of a drive from the bottom up, the culture and the integrity of the company. And so I'm excited to think that there's an optimism around, let's just get out of the way, harness the, I always think of, I used to race dog teams actually. So, those dogs, I don't know if you know this, but Huskies, they're insane. You think, oh, that's so mean to put a dog in front of a sled and have them drag you around. Are you kidding? I saw a picture of a sled to a dog, and they're like jumping up and down. They can hardly wait. You're like strapping them in. It's like, just give it a second, right? But then you let them go, and you're just like gone like a shot, right? I'd much rather employees like that you just lock in and harness into, and you're just like, holy smokes, let's go, versus trying to push rope, as you're trying to get them, motivated. So this is exciting to me. I mean, I think so. Some of it is questioning and asking the right things and understanding the character and the drive of the person to find those top performers. And it's not always even about competency. It's how do you dig in and actually find some of those core drivers for those people?
Well, to answer your question around millennials, it's exactly the same thing too, or any generation for that matter. It's they just have different perspectives of what matters, and if you just need to align to it, or you're just not going to have.
And it's person to person, not just generation to generation.
Sure, it is, yeah. And it's variable too, because so you mix that together with life changes. So there's post university and college, and then finding a partner, and then having kids, and then kids leaving home, and then aging parents, and so everybody's priorities change depending on these really big things that happen in your life, right? And exits, liquidity moments, all those kinds of things that happen in there too. It all really matters. But I got another question from those folks, and it's really I guess it fits in a bit to this, which is in today's business world, how important is it to have a skill in business intelligence or BI? Will it be a huge factor going forward? So business intelligence. I have my answer already, but
We'll start it off. Go ahead.
So, well, if you actually don't have business intelligence and you're not collecting or scraping data starting 4 years ago, you're probably way behind. Right? To me, it is when I get to my office at home, because I primarily work from from home today. The first thing that goes on is not email. It's what was reconciled overnight. Let me look at the set of data from yesterday, because that's going to inform my decisions based on what happens today and the conversations I have with my team. It's all on. It's on a 32-inch monitor on the edge of my desk, as big as you can make it, because I can't see the little numbers. And the more data, again, the more, like, businesses, every business is a data business of some kind today. It actually has value to it. So the more you can strip and conjoin in some way with economic information and personal business information, the better decisions you're going to make. And then you can actually synthesize that data to actually predict the future. So to me, it's all about the crystal ball. Like my BI guys know this too. I am looking for the ultimate holy grail crystal balls, which tells me from all the information is coming in what next quarter looks like.
Right.
Because I want to be able to adapt everything.
And it's not, I would imagine you're talking not, next quarter on a macro scale per se. It's like elements of that broken down into, this is where we think this shift is going to happen.
Sub elements. I mean, a lot of people will, and I don't know the man at all, but Jeff Bezos is from Amazon, is data and process workflow nuts.
Right.
Like everything gets measured. So, I mean, how else do you actually reduce friction in their workflow to get a package, across the world, from the world, anywhere in the world, unless you actually have a phenomenal amount of data to be able to measure the performance of that, right? Yeah. And the more data we have, actually, the better it comes. And to use an engineering example is that, which is what RDB Technologies company is all about, is removing the friction in the design process to, I believe there's a substantial amount of waste that occurs because of the way that we do engineering still today, that actually data can be used to inform the design process. So you learn iteratively how to actually cut 30% of waste out of all construction projects. People are willing to pay for that if you can cut 30% of waste, because there is. We're designing things like, I always forget the name of that. I think we talked about this last time, that game that's all done in cubes, everything's square.
Oh,
Minecraft?
Minecraft.
Yeah, the whole world is designed sort of Minecraft-ish. Everything is square, whereas the world's not square. It's done. Decisions are made in microseconds. It's so if you don't have that data, and then you can't synthesize that data or use machine learning or something like that to make better decisions, to improve margin, or to slice it a different way. My answer is you should already be lost. How do you make decisions? Right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's something really interesting about that. I feel like it's like seatbelts and airbags in a car, that if you don't have those basic business skills, you're handicapped. You're going to be, one arm tied behind your back. You simply will be encumbered to be able to deliver what's expected of you of your peers. So if you think about just having those business skills, that's a basic requirement. And then all the other difference makers that are more subjective, like your work ethic, your trustability, your likability, your drive, your curiosity. Top performers are always the most curious people in the room, and you're wanting to learn more. That's those things are not measurable, but those are difference makers for career growth. But having those skills and that business intelligence, that's just your basic language to be able to deliver what's required. But for trajectory in your career and being challenged with leadership opportunities and being empowered, it's all those other things as well, right? That's what I find so interesting about thinking about people who are entering the workforce today. I have one of the great takeaways that I've really been pleased with working with people is tapping into the intelligence of our young generation who are newer to our organization. And every week we have town halls on Wednesday morning, and we have all our staff gathered, and we talk about a few subjects, and it's a 40-minute meeting, and we try and make it very conversational. And when I have an opportunity to have our young talent present their thoughts on the industry, on politics, on social behavior, on COVID. Man, I love it. To me, I am just so impressed with our young generation. And what I hope for is when young people are entering the workforce, for them to find themselves an opportunity to present who they are and share their perspective. And employers can learn so much from their young people. And normally they're, it's in the past, traditionally, the floor was not often given to your most junior people. And you can flip that on its head. And an old establishment can be so much better by challenging and pulling from the intellect of your young generation, those that are not so drunk on the company Kool-Aid, those that have not, been biased by behaviors of the company or the industry from years of experience, but those that are way more fresh. Budget time for a lot of companies is right now, budget time setting for 2022. And if companies go to the younger staff and say, tell me about things that you think we're not spending wisely on. Where are we overspending on things, or where are we not spending enough? Tell me about, the technology that we use and how well is that working for them? If companies started with their young talent and said, tell me what you think. If you had the keys to the vault of this organization, how would you spend differently? So companies would learn so much from that.
Is this a matter of, I'm curious on a number of levels of that. One, are you seeing, and both of you seeing that in industry, that people are starting to get that more, like where they're actually turning to their the younger folks in the industry to ask those questions? Because to me, I look at it and think, man, that takes an incredible amount of courage, an incredible amount of humility, and frankly, incredible amount of wisdom, because and confidence, because it's like, man, no, I want to do what's right. And we know that the one with the most information makes the best decisions. And so get the information from all points and all BI as much as possible so that you can make those decisions. But I don't know why don't people get that? And is this something that's shifting? I guess that's where my main question is. Why don't people really understand the power of that? And are you seeing that shift now in some of your peers and some of the other larger businesses or older businesses out there?
I think it's a bit of a perspective about hierarchy, right? In terms of, the boss is the boss and makes no decision. Like, it's so old school, old fashioned kind of approach to things.
Well, old school, we're talking 10, 12 years. It's not that old school, unfortunately.
No, but if you go back, to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it's always the president 100%. Or the board or the director or whatever. That's the one that calls the shots, and we just sort of defer to experience and others. But it isn't necessarily always the answer doesn't really lie with those people, especially when it worked when change was linear. It doesn't work when change is exponential. So you can get pretty out of touch pretty quickly and get lost if you can't adapt your model in one way or the other. But, so I was going to add, Corey, I'm going to add one more thing to that bit about young people. It's not just, I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of having younger people making decisions, but also diverse young people making decisions. Because if your market, if you're serving a planet that's 50% female and 50% male, which we are, and if all the decisions are being made by men, we're pretty pooched. Pretty pooched. So the different folks and different backgrounds are going to make a pretty big difference in this kind of decisions that they make. I think it would help a lot in terms of, because we all have our own blind spots. As much as I like to be the person that's open to a lot of brand new ideas, diversity and gender is not a new idea, by the way, for me, but it's a reasonably new idea.
Well, I think also in terms of learning, so senior management learning from its young generation, but the young generation of an organization is also the best recruiters. So we've hired some of our best young talent through the referrals of our young talent. And I think that if any young person today is out looking for a job, don't just interview the HR people or the manager that's doing the recruiting for the company, but get a chance to talk to your peers who you would be working with, speaking to other young people in the organization to learn about their experience. How would they describe the culture? How would they describe what it would be like to spend the most awake hours of your day in that job with those people than you would spend anywhere else? I think the opportunity for young people to really shape organizations is more profound than I remember it being, because we are in this more flexible, more accommodating, more trusting work environment. And I think that bodes so well for young people today, because now they can really showcase who they are, because they'll be invited to have a seat at the table.
Amazing. You want to add anything to that? I mean, we've got 3 minutes. This is a perfect place to close.
Not really. I mean, Cory is, as usual, was right, but I think it's the more that we can do to be able to actually make those connections. Cory was talking. He was thinking we had 3 students come in this year just in our own office, and in grade 11 and grade 12 students that we brought into our office, and it was through the elite program at the U of A, and they actually weren't really interested in engineering. I actually came and talked to them for an hour and a half because I thought it would be really cool to come and meet them, and apparently they thought it was really cool to meet me. I don't know why, but they thought it did. But to see that that kind of talent in grade 11 and in grade 12, but they're all heading to it seems like they're all heading to law and medicine. And I was trying to. Bob Black was here last time, and so I had to encourage them not to go into the law because to give Bob a bit of a dig. But no, to see how prepared they are and how outspoken they are, and to understand just where they're coming from, it really kind of informs what I think what we're going to get. They're 17 and 18 now. When they go through and get their first degree, they'll be 22, they'll be entering the workforce. And still as Gen Z, and we're going to be in good shape, I think. Right?
I would hope so. Well, I love that. I mean, I think your points on diversity, young women, marginalized or different things. The world is a lot less old white guys, right? So getting that diversity in those decisions, I think is awesome. And I'm just grateful. Thank you, Cory. This is a fantastic conversation about structure and growth and culture. And I love these.
It's my pleasure. I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Anything else in closing, Colin? I don't know if you want to communicate internally. No, we're good. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I look forward to answering more questions as the EIR. You can always reach out to me through MacEwan and get back to the invites where this came from. And we just want to help you get your way forward in business in general. So we've got lots of great contacts, people that are excited about helping young and early stage entrepreneurs. Anything we can do to help, we're happy to do so. Stay tuned, watch announcements, because we're definitely going to probably expand this and keep going. This is our official last one. It may end up coming back with a new name change, but it'll still be the same kind of thing. Nasim and I talking with fabulous people around Edmonton. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.